Holy Bible, the King James Version. The first book of Moses, called Genesis. Chapter 1. In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven, to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven." And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth." And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind." And it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in the which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat." And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they turn and encamp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, over against Baal-zephon. Before it shall ye encamp by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, that he shall follow after them. And I will be honored upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. And it was told the king of Egypt that the people fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and of his servants was turned against the people, and they said, Why have we done this, that we have let Israel go from serving us? And he made ready his chariot, and took his people with him. And he took 600 chosen chariots, and all the chariots of Egypt, and captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh king of Egypt, and he pursued after the children of Israel, and the children of Israel went out with an high hand. But the Egyptians pursued after them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, and his horsemen and his army, and overtook them encamping by the sea, beside Pihahiroth, before Baal-zephon. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. And they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, Let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians, than that we should die in the wilderness. And Moses said unto the people, Fear ye not, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they go forward. But lift thou up thy rod, and stretch out thine hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. And the pillar of the cloud went from before their face, and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. And it was a cloud and darkness to them. But it gave light by night to these, so that the one came not near the other all the night. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground. And the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued, and went in after them to the midst of the sea, even all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass that in the morning watch the Lord looked unto the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and of the cloud, and troubled the host of the Egyptians, and took off their chariot wheels, that they drave them heavily, so that the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. And the Lord said unto Moses, Stretch out thine hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots and upon their horsemen. And Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to his strength when the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it. And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea, and the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the seashore. And Israel saw that great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord, and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Chapter 15.
Verify to document and to establish hypotheses that this could be a link in the Exodus pathway.
Based on his analysis of documentary evidence, Leonard Muller had long suspected the Aqaba coast as the probable location of the Red Sea crossing. In 1997, he heard reports from other divers who claimed to have found unusual coral structures, some resembling the shapes of chariot wheels. Muller decided to investigate these claims for himself.
The first time I was diving there, of course, we were then looking for possible artifacts. And I had seen on some pictures what we could look for. I was skeptical and excited, because if this is the place for the crossing, then of course that's a big thing. So I was excited about that. But I was also skeptical because 3,500 years, that's a long time. But if Nuweiba is the crossing site, then of course you would expect to find remains of the Egyptian army.
Like others who had explored Nuweiba before him, Muller immediately recognized the difficulty of this search.
If we assume that a number of artifacts were spread out on the seabed, sooner or later corals would start to grow on them. And of course, if you have a number of layers of coral growing on something, it's very hard to distinguish the structure that was there from the very beginning.
Though the coral complicates any search here, it may have been instrumental in preserving the shapes of ancient artifacts. For coral is a living organism that will not begin to grow on a foundation of sand or silt. Instead, it must first attach itself to a solid object, where it will sometimes conform to the shape of its host.
So for instance, if it would grow on a wooden artifact, the wood would normally disappear in the seawaters after a time. But if you have corals growing on the wooden artifact, the coral could have the shape of the wooden artifact. And then the corals would consume the wooden material over periods of time, but still keep the shape of the wooden artifacts.
During the course of his explorations, Muller observed that the pattern of coral growth at Nuweiba differed from other parts of the Gulf. Unlike the coral at the northern and southern ends of Aqaba, which often forms large, dense reefs, some covering many acres, the formations at Nuweiba Beach are generally smaller and scattered randomly across the seafloor. Divers familiar with the area have compared the distribution of coral here to a junkyard and the aftermath of a disaster. This description is fitting, and among the strange formations in these waters, many display features indicative of human engineering.
When we dive and when we film at the Nuweiba location, we look for certain structures, and you try to look for 90-degree angles or circular objects, wheel-like structures. So that is what you scan for, so to speak, when you dive. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at Nuweiba, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the seafloor. A slender, table-like structure, sometimes standing on end, with a coral-encrusted base, a straight shaft, and a circular top.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
While most of the possible artifacts found off the coast of Nueva are covered with coral, one significant discovery was not.
There is one find at the Nueva location that is of great interest, and that is the gilded wheel. It is a wooden basic structure of the wheel and is covered with gold, or electrum. It's a mixture of silver and gold. And corals have not been able to grow on it. It's been very well preserved. Although it's very fragile, it seems like the wooden content has been dissolved. So I mean, you could break it if you would try to remove it.
After its discovery, the fragile wheel-shaped veneer was photographed, then left in place on the sea floor. Later analysis revealed that its dimensions and design resembled four-spoke chariot wheels painted on an 18th dynasty tomb wall near the biblical date of the Exodus. After reviewing photographic evidence and making several dives of his own, Moeller concluded that a more systematic investigation of the Nueva seafloor was warranted. He realized that the limited diving time afforded by scuba equipment would never allow an extensive search of the area. A higher level of technology was necessary, and in the spring of 2000, the Discovery Media team lowered a robotic camera into these waters for the first time.
This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
Controlled from the ship, the camera was maneuvered across the seafloor, transmitting video images for study and evaluation.
We have been down to some 80-90 meters, so we can go deeper down that we can't do with ordinary diving, and we can be down as long as we like.
As in his previous searches at Nueva, Moeller scrutinized the coral for specific shapes.
We can see that because it's a 90-degree angle. You see the seabed here, there are some structures that are just a little bit above the surface of the seabed. They have a cross-like appearance, it's 90-degree angles, and there's a hole in the middle.
So the hub would be here?
Possibly a hub there, yeah. And the wheel would be a circle around.
This would be the rim of the wheel here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this could be a spoke here, possibly?
Yeah.
Possibly a spoke?
Yeah.
What would the diameter of that rim be?
That's a good question, but we would expect it to be about 1 meter, about 3 feet wide.
Okay.
In diameter.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Moeller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts, fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with the remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. And this could be the outer rim of a wheel going around like
The
that.
abundance of these unusual coral structures was even more apparent when tapes of the expedition were carefully scrutinized during the months following the search at Nueva.
Perhaps have a wheel here, standing on the seabed. When you sit and look at these films that has been taken by the remote camera, you see all these strange artifacts or coral growth on some artifacts or structures that appear repeatedly, time after time, at different locations at this spot. And you can sit there and think, well, what is this? This doesn't look like normal coral growth. And it is amazing to see that so many things and such large areas down there that are like a man-made structure.
While the robotic camera logged hours of video documentation, Viveka Pontien and other divers on a second research vessel used metal detectors to evaluate specific structures on the sea floor. Pontien and her colleagues realized that the wheels of many Egyptian chariots were often reinforced with bronze. They hoped to find evidence of the metal encrusted in coral. A scan of this formation indicated a circular metallic pattern around its edge, perhaps evidence of the broken rim of a chariot wheel. Other coral formations examined also contained fragments of metal. Viveka Pontien's interest in this research was heightened by a discovery she had made 3 years earlier, 8 miles due east of the Nueva Peninsula. During her stay in Saudi Arabia, Pontien not only searched for Mount Sinai, she also made several dives in an attempt to document evidence of the Egyptian army on the Saudi side of the Gulf.
And the Bible tells that Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore after they came across. So I figured there must be some stuff on the Saudi side. At one spot there is like a very shallow sort of land tongue going out in a straight angle towards Nueva. You could tell it by the shift of the color of the water. You could see how it was turquoise far out, you know. So I thought this would be interesting for exploration, so we did some dives near to that.
The scattered, irregular coral formations on the Saudi side of Aqaba resembled those previously found off the Nueva Peninsula. In the midst of them, Pontien photographed this circular object attached to what appears to have been a broken axle or hub. This discovery was significant for 2 reasons. Pontien had documented the coral-encrusted form of a wheel with dimensions similar to ancient Egyptian artifacts, directly across from the proposed Nueva crossing site. Her find also provided independent confirmation of earlier evidence establishing wheel-like formations on both coasts of the Red Sea, in accordance with descriptions in the biblical record.
And the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army, and he made the wheels of their chariots come off.
A common question is, why didn't you bring up artifacts? And there are several answers to that. The best thing to do when you find something is just to keep it in position. Document it, but keep it in position. It's very easy to destroy anything. And the other thing, it's illegal to remove artifacts, but also you're not allowed to bring up any corals from the Red Sea.
While Egyptian environmental laws prohibit removal of any coral for scientific dating and analysis, photographic evidence may provide a link to the time of the Exodus. Scholars have recognized that
For generations, we have been taught that we had to believe the story of the Exodus on faith alone. We were told that Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments, was located in Egypt, but there is no real evidence to make it believable. No pictures of left-behind artifacts, practically nothing to validate one of the most important stories of the Bible. The Bible says over 70 times that the Israelites went out of Egypt to Midian, which would be mostly or entirely modern-day Saudi Arabia. Is it true that there is very little evidence that the Exodus story happened, or have we actually just been looking in the wrong spot? While the theory of Moses and the Israelites being in Saudi Arabia is a relatively new theory to those of us in the outside world, it isn't new to the locals living there. We were frequently approached by Saudis eager to talk to Americans for the first time face to face. And one of the first things they would say with excitement was, "Did you know Moses was here? Let me show you where he and his people were." The tradition that the mountain in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula is Mount Sinai only dates back to the 4th century AD. New research based on Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sources indicate that there is a tradition that is 600 years older, and according to that tradition, Mount Sinai is in northwest Saudi Arabia. This other tradition points to Jebel Makla, a peak on the mountain range known as Jebel al-Lawz, as the true Mountain of Moses. Several historical sources, including Josephus, recorded that Mount Sinai is the highest mountain near a city that is today called Al-Bad. Locals refer to Jebel Makla as Jebel Musa, the Mountain of Moses.
So you call this one Jebel Musa?
Jebel Musa.
One of the distinguishing features of this mountain is the blackened top that you can see right behind me. The Bible says that God descended upon Mount Sinai as a fire. The blackened peaks stick out from the surrounding areas, and the rocks are only black from the outside. Researchers disagree as to whether the blackened rocks are actual evidence of God descending upon the mountain as a fire like the Bible says, or whether it's natural volcanic rock. A small handful of Americans tried to sneak into this area in the late 1970s and the 1980s. They were arrested, and their photos and videos were confiscated by the Saudi police. Their evidence was lost. However, images and videos slowly began leaking out to the outside world. According to those who snuck in and were arrested, these sites were being kept secret by the Saudi regime, a theocracy that hid them from the world using fences and police and the threat of force. As I tried to understand why the Saudis were hiding this important site, I began reaching out to sources in the Islamic world. For 15 years, I've been in the fields of intelligence, counterterrorism, and international relations, and one of my best contacts had a story to tell. He used to belong to a jihadist group, and he even had meetings with Pakistani intelligence and close associates of Osama bin Laden. And now, he's speaking out for the first time.
When I was in the jihad world, we all knew that the Mount Sinai was in Saudi Arabia. The people on the outside, even most Muslims, had no idea that it was there, because we fighters didn't want anyone to know about it. We all knew that the Saudi government hid it and protected it with security, and we all agreed with it. We believe that if a site, even a holy site, is visited by people and used for idolatry, it should be destroyed. But our hiding it, according to the Islamic law, is what saved it, so you can see it today and appreciate it.
Moses flees Egypt after killing an Egyptian who he saw abusing one of the Hebrew slaves. He then escapes to Midian as a fugitive. In Midian, Moses sits by a well, and he meets the daughters of Jethro who are getting water for his flock. Moses then marries one of his daughters. We are in the ancient land of Midian right now, near the town that locals describe as originally being the land of Jethro. When we visited this area, multiple Saudis approached us to tell us this is where Jethro and Moses resided. They excitedly pointed to an ancient well that is fenced off and marked as an archaeological site. The Saudis have long believed that this is the well where Moses met the daughters of Jethro, and Muslims from around the world come to see it. The book of Exodus says that the Red Sea crossing happened at a spot named Yam Suf, but experts have long disagreed about where it was. There are two proposed Red Sea crossing sites from Egypt into Saudi Arabia. The first candidate is at the Straits of Tiran, at the bottom of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The second candidate is at Egypt's Nuweiba Beach. Dr. Glenn Fritz, who has a PhD in environmental geography, conducted a massive study of the land and all the historical references about where the crossing happened. He found only one exact match: Egypt's Nuweiba Beach. Nuweiba Beach is almost 5 miles long and 3 miles wide, providing enough room for the Israelite population to fit. Here, they'd be trapped with the mountains on both sides, the Red Sea in front of them, and Pharaoh's army right behind them. Amazingly, there is a path under the water from Egypt into Saudi Arabia. The path is not too steep. The Israelites could have easily walked across if the waters were parted. Underwater research by Dr. Leonard Moeller showed strange shapes in the coral, leading some to believe that the remains of Pharaoh's army are there. According to this theory, the coral wrapped around the debris from Pharaoh's army and retained the shape of the objects after they dissolved. When they brought a metal detector down to the coral anomalies, the readings were consistent with circular patterns of metal resembling the parts of chariots. We had planned to dive near the possible Red Sea crossing point because it's a public diving site with stores where you can go and rent diving equipment. But we weren't allowed to. The Saudi police showed up, and they stayed with us until we left. After the Red Sea crossing, Moses and the Israelites stop at a place near Mount Sinai named Elim. Desperate for water, they find a unique location with 12 wells and 70 palms. Along the path to the possible real Mount Sinai, there is a match for Elim with many palm trees and, to this day, 12 wells. Saudi locals pointed us to this location and specifically referred to it as Elim. Another major event by Mount Sinai is the incident with the golden calf. While Moses is up on Mount Sinai, some of his followers begin worshiping a golden calf. They place it up on a stand and begin worshiping around it, and they set up an altar in front of it. When Moses comes down from Mount Sinai, he destroys the golden calf and sprinkles its remains into the river that comes down from the mountain. Here, in front of the mountain, we have the remains of what may have been that golden calf worship site. Now behind me, in this fenced-in archaeological site that the Saudis are protecting, you see both a stand with many petroglyphs of cows and people worshiping cows, as well as a structure that is slightly lifted that may be the altar in front of the golden calf stand. There's a sign in Arabic and English warning intruders against going into the area. The local tradition that this is where the golden calf was is so strong that if you approach it, you'll be suspected of searching for gold. According to the Bible, the worshippers of the golden calf say, "These are your gods, O Israel." This verse indicates that there are multiple depictions of bulls as the Israelites are worshiping the golden calf. On the top of the stand where the golden calf would have been placed, there is a circular indent where the rock has been worn down. It's speculated that this is where Moses grounded the golden calf into powder. After Moses destroys the golden calf, 3,000 of the golden calf worshippers are killed, so there must be a spot where thousands of people were buried. About 4 miles from this site, there's a massive ancient graveyard. It appears to be a mass burial site where the graves were dug all at once. It's located just outside the plain where the Israelites would have camped, so it's exactly where it should be if this is where that story took place. Here too, the Saudis have a sign identifying it as an archaeological site, and it's patrolled by police. The book of Exodus says that Moses built an altar of uncut stone at the foot of Mount Sinai and also set up 12 pillars to symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel.
Right here at the foot of the mountain, we see this structure that resembles an ancient altar. And what we are standing in right now is probably the animal chutes that would lead them to sacrifice at the foot of the mountain. The animal chutes lead to this area of the structure, which may have been the slaughter platform for animal sacrifices. The Saudis, of course, say that this has nothing to do with Moses, but they admit that they found animal waste and bones underneath this area when they dug. People who have been to this site decades ago say that this site used to be much cleaner, and you could more clearly see the remains of about 12 pillars, as well as a stone platform that they would stand on.
Near the altar and the 12 pillars, Moses reads to the Israelites the Book of the Covenant, and they agree to it. This means that Moses probably had a spot right above the altar that served as a stage in order to address the people. Right above this area with the altar and the pillars, there is an area that could have been a perfect spot for Moses to be singing and heard when the covenant is made. A Saudi local actually pointed to this part of the mountain and showed us how Moses' voice would have echoed like he was speaking in a natural amphitheater. The Bible says that a brook flowed down from Mount Sinai, providing water for the Israelites. The brook must have come down near the altar at the foot of the mountain for the sacrifices to take place. And the brook must have come near the golden calf because Moses threw its remains into the river. It's very easy to see where there was once a stream coming down from this mountain, where there's evidence of burnt sacrifices. It then ends up near the possible golden calf worship site. There's even evidence of wells around the area where a pool of water would have formed, proving that a large population once lived there. According to the Bible, the prophet Elijah travels to Mount Sinai, and once he gets there, he goes into a cave, and that's where he talks to God. The real Mount Sinai must therefore have a cave that is accessible, safe, and suitable for sleeping. This cave above the altar is about 15 feet high, 20 feet long, and 20 feet deep. If this is the real Mount Sinai, then this is almost certainly the Cave of Elijah. On the way to Mount Sinai, the Israelites camp where there's no water. Moses goes up to a distinct rock and strikes it with his rod, and miraculously, water pours forth for his followers. The historian Josephus said that the split rock could still be seen in his time, and it was so big that it could not have been moved. Is it possible that this split rock still remains today, testifying to the accuracy of this story? The answer is yes, and it is stunning. This split rock was first discovered by Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American couple that was working in Saudi Arabia in the early 1990s. The local Bedouins have long had two names for this area, the Water of Moses and the Split Rock of Moses.
This split rock is on top of a 100-foot hill and is somewhere between 40 and 60 feet high. And what's really amazing about this specific location in the valley along the possible route to Mount Sinai is that the rocks underneath the split rock are smooth, as if tons and tons of water poured forth, forming a miniature lake at the bottom for the Israelites to drink from. If you have a relationship with a local, they'll tell you that this area is related to Moses, but the Bedouins that live here will try to keep you out.
We saw this firsthand as we were chased out of the area.
Okay, so we are flooring it. We're gonna see if this guy follows us. We heard 2 gunshots. This guy's like, doesn't really want to party.
The Bible says the area near the split rock where the Israelites fought the Amalekites is named Rephidim, which means place of rest. Hebrew inscriptions we found there have been interpreted to say place of rest, the definition of Rephidim. Closer to the mountain, inscriptions have been found that Dr. Miles Jones, a scholar of ancient Hebrew, believes are talking about the battle with the Amalekites. He says one of the inscriptions refers to the death of an Amalekite. Nearby, there are 2 inscriptions that Dr. Jones believes are marking where a Hebrew mother and daughter died. The Bible says that God told the Israelites that they possess the land wherever the soles of their feet touch. Near the split rock and near the mountain, there are many inscriptions with an image of a foot and a sandal. Next to the image, there is Proto-Hebrew writing that means the sole of the foot. We also found inscriptions that were translated and found to refer to Yahweh, the Hebrew name for God. There's another area near the mountain named Wadi Musa, or the Valley of Moses. Here, a depiction of a menorah was found, and it might be the oldest depiction of a menorah known today. Now, a new eyewitness has come forward to reveal that the Saudis have been hiding the evidence of the Exodus since at least World War II. This man was an American pilot who met the King of Saudi Arabia. Bob Cornuke was one of the first people to reach Jabal Maqla in the 1980s, and he recently interviewed that pilot and made the footage available for this video.
It's an honor to meet you.
Well, thank you.
Our lives have intersected possibly in something very historic, and we're talking about where the real Mount Sinai is located. And I had no idea that someone as far back as World War II would have seen the mountain and had been told that the mountain was the holy mountain of Moses. Did any of the Muslims tell you that that was a holy mountain?
Oh yes. I guess everybody in the military knew it was holy.
Yeah.
Well, they forbidden me to fly around it, and it was off limits that I'd be killed either by God or by maybe some of them, I don't know. And when I took off, I was half scared to death. You bet I flew around it.
But it was different than the rest of the mountains because it was black on top?
Oh, it was a blackish green. It was dark enough to be somewhat frightening. You don't know what I really believe. I think it's Mount Sinai. I think God let me fly around it. That's what I think. I think He let you and me both live.
Why haven't we heard about this other candidate for Mount Sinai? Why has almost the entire focus been on the traditional site despite its lack of compelling evidence.
Think about how many things line up with the biblical story right here at this mountain.
There's a beach and path where the Red Sea crossing could have happened, matching the biblical account. You can see how the Israelites could have camped near Elim with its 12 wells and 70 palms. Along the way to Jabal Machlah, there's a split rock and area suitable for camping. There's a mountain referred to as the Mountain of Moses, with a large plain in front of it where millions of Israelites could have camped. You can see an altar of uncut stone at the foot of the mountain, where there's evidence of burnt sacrifices, right where it should be. There's evidence of bull worship, and you can see exactly how Moses would have seen the golden calf worship going on as he came down from the mountain. There's a brook that comes down from the mountain just like the Exodus story says. You can see right where the cave of Elijah might have been. All of these little details have to fit, and they fit. After I came back from the trip, people asked how I felt standing there where so few people have been able to. And the predictable feelings were easy to describe. The adrenaline, amazement, awe. But there was an emotion that was more difficult to describe. I didn't deserve to be there. I'm not someone who's given away his wealth to the poor. I'm not a scientist or a pastor. And there are still days where I feel like I have no faith at all. But then as I looked at the mountains, I remembered something. The Bible has a clear pattern where God doesn't use the best or the most expected. Even Moses was so insecure that he didn't want the job. Rather than using the most qualified, the pattern is that God uses the unexpected, the insecure, the flawed, the depressed, the doubter, the underdog. Every single person can make a difference, especially those that think they can't. As you watch this, the Saudis are constructing a super city that is planned to be 33 times the size of New York. If all of us don't take action, Saudi construction in the area may destroy key evidence and prevent excavation for the foreseeable future. To try to stop these sites from being threatened, we have set up a website and a nonprofit organization to support further research and to convince the Saudis to preserve the sites so they can be saved and investigated. We're entering a period that we have never been in before, one where this footage and other evidence of the Exodus and the Bible overall are only a click away for anyone on Earth with an internet connection. And as these sites are revealed, it will change the Middle East forever and impact the billions of people who follow Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and those with no faith at all. The world is about to change.